I think we will probably get started. Um, Usually we have kind of a small little group here for my presentation. It's basically for talking about accommodations and program modifications that the schools could provide for our kids who have been diagnosed with thyroid cancer. So hopefully you're in the right place. Get schooled is the name of this session. Welcome to all of you. Welcome to the conference. I'm sure you will find it so helpful. I'm usually there in person, but this year it just didn't work out. But hope to be to more conferences there in person in the future. Although Zoom is a very good option too. So let me go on here, get this to work. There we go. So my name is Pam Mendenhall, and I've been a volunteer for ThyCa for probably about 15 years or so. My daughter Alyssa was diagnosed with follicular thyroid cancer when she was 10. I also have a younger daughter, Jessica, who had a pretty significant, pretty big thyroid nodule when she was 6. So it was both kind of going on at the same time. So, Alyssa, we took her in, had surgery. It was cancer. So my youngest was 6. We took her in, had surgery. Hers was not cancer yet at that time. We did find out there was some genetics involved. My husband also had some thyroid cysts, nodules, lesions. So the mutation, they actually have 3 mutations, and that came from his side of the family. So we had my husband and both of my daughter's thyroids out all within a year. So I'm the only one left in the family without a thyroid. So it's been kind of a long journey, but it's been okay. Alyssa's doing very well now. She's 27, living in Minneapolis and doing well. I'm also a school social worker. I've been working in the school system for about 30 years now. And so I thought this might be a good presentation to kind of combine the two, with my personal experience and my professional experience. And feel free to stop me at any point. This is very informal, and there's a very small group of us. So again, feel free to stop me if you have any questions. I kind of think this slide is a little bit funny in a way. You've been asleep for like 100 years. Why don't you get up? Just shut up and get my thyroid pills. My daughters, both of them had thyroidectomies and kind of struggled with being tired a lot over the last 17 years. So again, a lot of adjusting the medication over the years. So this is just kind of my introductory statement. As we as parents try to help our kids deal with the thyroid cancer, and also the potential of difficulties of managing school when they don't feel well, I wanted to make everybody aware of what's called Section 504, as well as individual health plans. They're similar in a lot of ways, but also a little bit different. And I'll review both of those in detail. So first, Section 504 plans. So just a bit of background about how these came about. Section 504, it's a part of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973 that prohibits discrimination based upon a disability. And it could be, again, as you probably know, many kinds of disabilities. It could be medical. It could be like kids in school. We have a lot of ADHD. We have some depression, some anxiety. So it can be any types of those medical or mental health diagnoses. An impairment as used in Section 504 may include, again, like I said, any disability. It can be long-term or short-term. But what they use to define whether or not a child needs a 504 in the school system is whether or not it substantially reduces or lessens the student's ability to access learning in the educational setting because of that medical disability, mental health disability, behavior, whatever the case may be. And I know substantially is very subjective, which when I do this in the school system, sometimes it's kind of difficult to define what is actually substantial. I think in our case with kids with thyroid cancer, it definitely can substantially affect their learning. So a 504 is an anti-discrimination legislation that requires school to meet the needs of students with disabilities. Every school district addresses the 504 in a different way. So I know our school district probably addresses it differently than other districts were. At the end of the presentation, and I'm hoping we have some way, I haven't asked Gary yet, that I can get a copy of the slides presentation to people who want it, because I have a lot of links on there regarding explanations of 504 plans, and as well as examples of what one of those may look like. So again, Section 504 is a federal statute. It is not optional, as some districts may claim. Sometimes, even though I work for the school system, sometimes it's like pulling teeth to have teachers do 504 plans. You know, it's work, it's paperwork, it's time, but definitely a lot of kids need it. I worked at a high school where there were about 2,000 students, and they only had 2 504 plans in the building. Well, I can tell you there needed to be more than 2 504 plans in that building. But again, some districts, some schools just kind of dig their heels in. So that's why I think it's important for you to be an advocate for your son or daughter. Section 504 plans are formal plans that we develop to give the child basically the supports that they need. So the whole purpose of a 504 plan is to level the playing field by providing accommodations that they need to be successful. It's, you know, not to do everything for them. It's not to give them an advantage, you know, above the other students. It's to provide that level playing field so they have the same opportunities as other typical peers in the classroom. And these can be at any age too, 504 plans. They can even be through college and through adulthood because it's federal legislation. The plans prevent discrimination as they protect the rights of children with disabilities in the school. Again, they're covered under, click on this link here. Hopefully it'll work. There we go. Again, I have links in here about Section 504, the Rehabilitation Act of 1973, what you need to know. I really like kind of this website because it spells it out in layman's terms and it's really easy to understand. So again, I have that linked in my presentation. Why develop these plans? As we know, thyroid cancer treatments can have adverse effects on learning, both short-term and long-term. So right here, a lot of things that it can affect, especially when you're going off of medication, attention span, cognition, your energy level. My daughter was so tired when she was taken off of her medications. You know, each time she had a scan or the thyroglobulin checked, she was very tired. She was even to the point when she was in a college, she used to play for a college band, and you know how loud those could be. She would fall asleep on the field. And that's kind of another story, but just kind of how that affected her. Concentration, again, when she was younger, when she was, you know, 10, 11, 12, had to be taken off of her medication. She couldn't even play a simple game of Uno with me. She couldn't remember the colors. She couldn't remember the numbers, which is very scary as a parent to see. But, you know, once they start back on their medication, it's going to get better. Executive functioning, like initiating tasks, problems with organization, working memory, just remembering, you know, what a direction that you just heard 5 seconds ago is going to be very hard for these kids. Problems with planning and organizing, self-regulating, and then emotional control. My daughter got very sad when she was off medication. So again, being off that thyroid hormone can really affect you, your mental health too at that time. So I think it's important that teachers understand that also. I think, you know, mental health is probably just as, if not more important, as the medical problems that they're experiencing. It's making sure that their mental health is okay during that time too. And schools can play a big part in that. There's also counselors there, maybe a trusted teacher, people that they can talk to just to help them get some more support during that time. Why develop them? As we know, short term, kids need accommodations before surgery, like the low iodine diet. My daughter, I had to pack her lunch when she was on that diet. She took it into the nurse's office. They then, after that, she went there, heated it up, had her lunch there. Accommodations too may be needed because of a lot of absences due to doctor's appointments, surgeries, and treatment. Some schools, I think, are more understanding of those absences than others. I remember when my daughter was absent, we got kind of a nasty letter from the school district that your child has not been in school for so many days. And, education is important. You should encourage your child to go to school, and basically kind of reprimanding me as a parent for not sending her to school. So I called the assistant principal and I said, my daughter has cancer. There's a really good reason she's not at school. And their answer was, well, we don't have time to go through all of our letters before we send them out. And I said, well, maybe you should. So I guess just for my peace of mind, I wrote a 2-page summary to ask to be in her file about why she was absent. So, and I work for the school system. So sometimes, most of the time they're great. Sometimes can be very difficult. Again, long-term consequences. My kids, they started at 10 and 6 with the Synthroid, and that medication needed adjusting, throughout probably till they were 22, 23 years old. So again, there could be a long-term need for those accommodations. Finding the appropriate TSH level, again, could take weeks, months, and can continue to be a challenge. Establishing the 504 plan usually begins with a letter from the doctor, which is what we got, describing how basically what's going on with her medically and how it may impact her educationally. Parents, teachers, other school personnel, we all get together to determine the scope of services, the accommodations that are needed. Usually accepted practice, usually with our 504s that we do in my school district as we review them annually. But again, there's no regulation as to how often those have to be reviewed. Obviously, if there is, any kind of medical change, concern you may have, then I would request, obviously, that be reviewed sooner. So a good 504 plan should include eligibility determination. Again, that's kind of, is it substantially affecting their learning? It should include accommodations that they need. And it also has sections for what's the teacher, student, and parents' responsibility. So again, eligibility determination. Again, it has to be substantially limiting the individual in one or more major life activities, which could be school. And it has to be a mental or physical impairment. Although it does not have to be, at least in our district, it does not have to be a specific diagnosis anymore. We used to require a diagnosis for 504 plans, but that's no longer a requirement. Accommodations, justifications. So accommodations don't change what kids learn, it's how they learn. So again, we want to remove those barriers for them to level the playing field so they have access to learning just like their peers. So some examples of accommodations could include changes to the environment, taking tests in a quiet, separate space, changes to instruction, the teacher checking in frequently to make sure they understand kind of those key concepts, changes to the curriculum, how it's presented, like getting outlines of lessons. A lot of kids really have a hard time, especially being off their medication, keeping up on, writing and taking notes and things like that. And to be honest, as I said before, it's not only the medical impact, it's the mental health impact too that it has on a lot of our kids that makes learning a lot of times difficult for them. Make sure accommodations are, again, designed to address the specific major life activities, and also designed to meet their educational needs, again, level the playing field, written clearly and specifically. So I know from experience that with a lot of teachers, you need to be very specific in stating what the student needs. And it is illegal. The 504 plan is a legally binding document. So teachers need to follow through with it, although some may not want to. Um, you do have to. I got some pushback in middle school from a nurse at my daughter's middle school who basically said, when I asked her to provide, homework, I would go pick it up for her at the end of the day, maybe some extra books, notes that she could look at. She said, no, it's Alyssa's responsibility to get those, and the teachers will not be happy about making those accommodations. And you can just imagine how I felt. I said, that's not an option. This needs to happen. And that's when I made her write a health plan as well as a 504 plan, because I thought if I'm going to get this kickback, and again, I work in the education system, then I want something in writing for my daughter to make sure that these accommodations are in place and that everybody knows what those accommodations are. Teacher responsibility. You have to make sure teachers understand the accommodations. And again, they must legally follow through with the accommodations. Ensure open communication, make sure accommodations are implemented appropriately and with fidelity. Student responsibility, make sure your student understands the responsibilities as well as they can. Provide written reminders. I know I gave my daughter some sticky notes with things, just a visual reminder when she was off of her medication and had some problems concentrating and remembering things. Parent guardian responsibility, obviously make sure that medical information is communicated. And again, each of these 504 plans, they should be individual for the student. There should not be any like cookie cutter 504 plans. Again, it should meet each student's needs. And make sure, again, teachers are updated with any changes in the medical status. I found it more helpful when I forwarded my teachers messages from the doctor than from me. They just took it a little bit more seriously when I did that. Okay, individual health plans, a little bit different. Individual health plans, it's something that a registered nurse develops. And basically it is accommodations, program modifications to hold the school accountable for any supports that the student may need. So schools have to officially comply with the IHP requirements as well as those by Section 504. Although the 504, because it's federal legislation, has a lot more teeth in it than the individual health plan. Individual health plan that considers how to deal with what might happen with a student medically while at school. So I know with my daughter, again, she was really, really tired. So we had access, to the nurse's office for her to sleep and take a nap and rest if she needed to. And I'll go over some more accommodations later. But again, it's a team that develops the individual health plan, primarily the nurse, but it's a team. So you have the parents, caregivers, healthcare provider. Again, that letter from the doctor is really helpful. And then a multidisciplinary team. It could be the principal, coaches, teacher, whoever needs to be at the meeting, who's ever responsible for providing that learning to the student. A health plan gives both the student individual health plan serves both the student and the school, gives the student his or her own family the opportunity to discuss concerns with staff. So it's just a nice time, I think, to get together as a group to talk about medically what's going on with your student and what you would like and what needs to happen at school. Clarifies important things, again, how medication will be administered, For my daughter, and I probably would not have had to have done this, but I wasn't as knowledgeable back then. I gave them some Synthroid to have at school just in case she forgot to take her Synthroid in the morning. I know it has such a long half-life. It probably wasn't needed at the time, but I made sure that the nursing office had that medication if it was needed. Talking about how the health status will be monitored, I updated them whenever she had a medication change. If she had to go off of her medications, obviously, her scans, her blood work, ultrasounds, just the results of all of that information. I was sure that I updated them on all that. Again, it's nice that you have that document in a centralized location. For our kids at my district, it wasn't in their cumulative folder, but they had a special yellow folder that had all the health plans, 504 plans, all of the accommodations that kids may need. So teachers would know where to go in order, if they had a question, in order to find that out. So again, the health plan varies from state to state, and I included in this presentation a link to an example of a health plan too. Unlike an IEP or 504 plan, which has a standardized format, IHPs are developed by the school, and no state or federal protection comes with an individual health plan. Like I said, those 504 plans have more teeth in them than the health plans. But they can be used, the health plans can be used in conjunction with a 504 plan or by themselves. To be honest, I don't know of many kids who have had one of each. Usually it's combined into one document. And again, I would err on the side or choose the 504 plan again, just because it is backed by that federal legislation. So if your child's circumstances change, or you're not satisfied, you can always request a meeting with the school. As an IHP is an agreement and not legally binding document. There's no legal recourse, but most of the time, if you ask the school to meet, they're usually pretty good at providing accommodations. You're going to get some, kickback and heels dug in every once in a while, but for the most part, most teachers want to support the student and do what's right. So with either a 504 plan or an IHP, again, just as I do every time my daughter's had a medical appointment, I write down the questions ahead of time. So I would do the same thing for any type of school meeting, whether it's a 504 plan or a health plan. If you're anything like me, I get very nervous before medical appointments, especially. So I make sure I write everything down because sometimes I get so anxious. It's really hard for me to remember those. Same with a lot of parents at an IEP meeting, a 504 plan meeting. You may get very nervous and anxious. So I would just write all your thoughts and your questions down ahead of time. Take notes during the meeting. And also good practice to conduct an annual review if you do have one of these plans. And I can't stress enough to bring an advocate to the meeting. It's always better to have an extra set of ears, maybe 2 extra sets of ears, to make sure you understand things. I mean, more often than not, when my husband and I went, I would hear something and he wouldn't hear it and vice versa. So it just really helps. This little cartoon here, it kind of reminds me of the school system where I work. It says, "I'm not sure why Mr. Barth always feels compelled to bring an advocate to the IEP meeting." And that's, I think, sometimes how parents feel, very outnumbered. We at the school, like I said, we have coaches, teachers, principals, all of these people on one side of the table. And then sometimes it's just the parent and maybe just the parent or one other person. And I know they feel outnumbered. That's not our intention, is to make them feel that way. But again, just stressing, bring an advocate, bring somebody else along with you. So accommodations that may be used, but are not limited to. So these are just some examples. Shortened or modified assignments, a modified schedule, like more difficult subjects when more alert. My daughter was more alert in the morning, so we tried to have the more difficult subjects then. Extended time on tests or assignments. Peer assistance, if needed with note taking, and like anything else too. No, it could be note taking, it could be organizational skills. Anything that peers can help out with would be great. Work sent home. Again, I told you I stopped after school to pick up her work. Additional time to complete work and assignments, homeschool communication logs. You know, we had a log way back when, again, with my daughter, it was quite a while ago. Now, of course, you have email, which is great. Our school system has a communication on like an electronic communication system that they use called Seesaw to kind of go back and forth with parents. So any kind of homeschool communication would be great. Rearranging class schedules if possible. I know that's difficult, especially high school. Limited PE. My daughter did not go to PE when she was off of her medication. She was just too tired. Access to a refrigerator for kids who need to bring their lunch in. So we had that. Taping lectures if your kid's in high school, oral tests. I requested this too of the district where my daughter was attending, delaying formal district-wide testing or standardized testing until those TSH levels are normal and stable. Because sometimes some of those tests in high school, especially if you're preparing for college, you want to get good scores on them, and you don't want to take those if your student is struggling with thyroid levels. Provide for rest time during the day if they're tired. Allow them to drink water at school and have snacks as appropriate. Some teachers will be reluctant to do this because, well, if they have water snacks, I'll have to give the whole class snacks. No, that's not true. Fair doesn't mean equal. So I think most teachers are really good about that. In some cases, though, you might have to push a little bit. Waive penalties regarding absenteeism and tardiness. And I told you my little story about that. Shorten school days while undergoing treatment and medication adjustment. As my daughter, was off medication during her second and third weeks, she just attended school in the morning. Again, have one contact person at school to help collection of assignments, which would be nice. Slow return back to school after treatment, which my daughter did when she did go back on medication. She took Synthroid, and they also gave her Cytomel, which is a T3 supplement that's quicker into your system for a week too. So she could take that, get her system going a little bit quicker, and get back to school. And again, access to recorded lectures. A lot of things now I think are online too that the kids can have access to. So I do have a link here again to another site. If you want to read, again, it's very long, but this is from the Department of Education, if you have any questions. Okay, but as far as accommodations, don't add anything if they aren't necessary. For one, you want your child to continue to be as independent as they can during this time. You want to maintain as much normalcy as possible too for you and your child. Again, teachers, a lot of times, if you put like all these accommodations at everything in but the kitchen sink, it's difficult for not only for them to remember, but to carry those out too. So I think it's important to really just delineate and add in all of those essential accommodations. Okay. I love how people understand that thyroid disease is a life-altering chronic illness, said no thyroid patient ever. I think sometimes because we can't see the illness, especially with our kids, teachers sometimes maybe a little more reluctant to provide accommodations. I mean, if you had crutches or a brace or a wheelchair or something like that, teachers would, I think, oh yeah, I understand, I get it, let's make this accommodation. Unfortunately, I think some teachers think, well, this child isn't motivated, they're lazy, and that's really unfortunate. Just because you can't see the disability doesn't mean it's not there. Again, in my presentation, I have an example of our 504 format that we use at our school system. can have access to that. It's a pretty long document. And I also have an example of an individual health plan. This was my daughter's. I should probably update it to a recent one because, you know, things change over the years, but this is just kind of what it looked like for her and what she needed. But again, I can send you hopefully somehow send you a copy of this. Okay, as a parent, you have the right to file a complaint if you think that the district's not in compliance with your child's accommodations that they need. I know this is the last thing you'd want to think about when you're going through your child having thyroid cancer, but it is an option if you feel like they're really not complying. Again, as I said before, not every disability is visible. Okay. Any questions?
So our son is actually a sophomore in college now. And we actually ran into I think this would have been super helpful last spring when he was going for surgery. We actually hit roadblocks. The school was extremely unhelpful. Like, I wouldn't say they were unhelpful. They were super resistant. But the challenge we faced was, like, obviously we're not allowed to communicate on his behalf. He has to, because he's not, he's 18. Oh, hold on. I think, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So because he was 18, he had to communicate on his own behalf because he was considered able. And so we found that actually the amount of time he was putting into it, we spoke to the surgeon. The surgeon told us to go teacher to teacher in place. And if that, because the surgeon kept submitting the paperwork over and over and over again. And I think now I have a better understanding of presentation, a better understanding of maybe what we could have done differently. But we ultimately ended up having most of the teachers just did the accommodating. It was amazing. They were really, we actually had one teacher that helped my son with some of the other teachers. But
wow. Great.
yeah, but like, I don't think that the school, like, one of the things that was interesting was the aspect of mental health, like what you talked about, him trying to do all this while facing a cancer diagnosis. He did his surgery across spring break. So, it was a lot of planning, everything, and trying to, it was very important to him to maintain college. So my question is, like, you said your children also went through college with some of this. How did you handle that? Because it was extremely frustrating to not be able to just do it for him. And also just even helping him, how poorly it went.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a great question. And I think it's really hard. Like I said, my kids started this when they were 10 and 6. And so from little on, fourth grade, kindergarten, I was doing everything as mom. So as I got older, high school, you try to let go a little bit. I couldn't let go much, but then they go to college, and both of my kids went an hour and a half away from where I live, so it wasn't too bad. Um, I found myself, it's really a hard balance, I think, because you want to be there to help your kids and get them through college, and you want to be a role model to them to show them how to advocate for yourself too.
Absolutely.
And I found that too, but it's kind of hitting that sweet spot that, okay, is mom going to let me do this for me? Okay, I'm independent. I want to do this myself, mom. Don't do this for me, or
I
stay away from me.
So I guess that question I'm actually asking, you may not have encountered this, was like, our son was doing it all himself. Like, he really was. The school was extremely, like, and it's weird because basically what we were told was if we submitted under, like, he has anxiety, then they would push it through. And he was adamant that, like, he was not anxious. He was upset because of like, he told them, I'm upset because you're not being reasonable in this process and you're not giving me the tools to be successful here. But,
Right.
like that. So maybe it sounds like maybe you didn't encounter that.
Not so much. The other thing is, is it your son? When was he
Yeah, it's our
diagnosed?
son. It was this past spring.
Okay. And I think it may be different because by the time my kids went to college, from age 10 to 18, we had 8 years, for her to kind of get through this. And by then, she didn't have to have any more scans in high school. She didn't have to be off of her medication in high school or in college. So we weren't going through, actual like treatment. things like that. I mean, she still had her annual blood work and ultrasounds and everything like that, but nothing that she had to be off of her medication for while she was in college. So that may be a little different for me.
Yeah, so we were fortunate. He didn't have to go off his medication at all because we used Thyrogen. But we actually what we did, because this was so challenging, is we did his RAI during the summer so that we didn't have to deal with the school. Which
Perfect.
is really not optimal either. You should be doing it based on what's the best. It turned out
Yeah,
it was the best outcome, but
right.
so okay. I was trying to I think advocating with your child is really hard. And I think that also in this post-COVID world, I think that there was also this resistance in general to give accommodations. Like,
Yeah,
there was, because I
yeah.
think everybody's coming with a request.
Exactly. And, I agree with you. And, like I said, I've worked for the school system for 30 years. I know there are great teachers, there's great people out there, but every once in a while you encounter that one, like the nurse who didn't want to provide accommodation. She was even a breast cancer survivor. And I
Wow.
thought, how can you be like that? I don't get it. As far as college though, is there someone, like, I know in our school system, we have like an equity officer. Is there someone at the college level who would be an
So there
advocate?
probably, I'll be honest with you, there probably is. And again, this is where I think this, like, allowing your child to advocate for themselves. Our son made the decision that this was taking too much of his time and causing stress, that he just, it was in the middle of school. And he was concerned about not getting things in place prior to surgery. So he just
Mhm,
went to the teachers himself.
mhm.
He wrote a letter to each, scheduled time,
Wow.
coordinated, and then he had group work too, so like he also had to coordinate with, it's not easy for a child to tell another child, because they are children,
Right.
to
Yeah.
tell them, like, I have cancer and here. So like he had to get groups to agree to do work 2 weeks ahead of things like that. There's absolutely, the school absolutely could have facilitated all of that and just,
Yeah.
made it too complicated. So by the time we realized we weren't going to get the accommodation, like, we would not have had it in time for a surgery.
Right. Right. Yeah. Usually every college or university, like I said, they should have somebody, an advocate, for your son, or
Okay.
even to be able to go to be able to help with that process. They should have a navigator, or someone in charge that could maybe, like I said, that could help advocate for him, for you. Even some of the counselors there. I mean, I know he doesn't have a diagnosis of anxiety, and that, may not be his disability at all. But you think that a counselor would be able to, or some kind of representative at the university would be able to help him navigate through that
I think you're
process.
probably right. I think there is something comparable to an equity officer, but again, by the time we were kind of in a race against time, because we had probably 4 weeks from diagnosis, like true diagnosis, like where
Mm-hmm.
we met with the surgeon to surgery. So there
Yeah,
wasn't and he was in school. So yeah,
yeah.
time is of the essence. So he told us he was making this decision to exit the conversation with them and move forward with a more proactive model. And I have to
Mm-hmm.
respect that, but I feel at the time I felt really bad that I couldn't provide better support to get
Mm-hmm.
those. Like, I just didn't have the answers. And I feel like this is extremely helpful, because even though it was geared a little bit more towards obviously school age, like under 18, the information would have been extreme. I think I could have utilized this to help him. So thank you, because
And
it'll help someone else.
and of course, like I said, with the 504 legislation, that goes through a lifetime. I mean,
Yeah. And I don't think, I wasn't aware of that. So, and they had to be, right? Like they knew. So that's where, like that's the example. So thank you. I know my husband had a question, so I'm going to give him the microphone.
yeah,
He's laughing because I always talk first.
I do too with my husband. So
Hi, Pam. My name's
hi,
Bruce.
hi,
Oh,
Bruce.
yeah, well, you're on the screen here. I had two questions. One about the 504 plans. Are those at the school level or at the individual teacher level? Because yeah, you'd clearly need to explain that to every year to different teachers.
Sure. Yeah, that's at the school level. So it is, like I said, it is federal legislation, so it has some teeth in it. Just like kind of an IEP would, but yeah, that would be at the school level. And at all of our 504 meetings that I'm at, it's a multidisciplinary team. It's this, like I said, it's the teachers, it's the principal, it's if you have educational coaches. So it is at the school level, at least at my district. I would assume that it would be in most other districts too. Does
Okay.
that answer your question?
Yes, and my second question was related to what my wife was is that so you said you put all the what do you call it, 504 plans in a binder together for easy reference?
Well, they're individual students, yeah.
Oh,
So
okay.
we don't, so we have a nurse. So the nurse has all of the individual health plans, and she has those in her office in a binder, just in her office. But with the 504 plans, those are each separate. At
Okay.
least in our district, we have like the cumulative folder that has all, you know, the grades, report cards in it. And then because this is more confidential information, the 504 plan goes in a separate folder right next to that student's cumulative folder. So they're the 504 plans are not all put together in one place. They're right next to that student's folder, cumulative folder. And districts file things differently. I know. I mean, they could have a central location for the 504 plans too in some places, but you know that it's obviously confidential information.
Yeah, no, I agree, and that's good. That's a good that's good. From the the students' point of view. Just expanding on what my wife was saying on our son last year, there were our son had trouble getting accommodations, and there was a couple examples of there's a couple other students that seem to get endless exemptions for anything, and my son wanted. In particular, he didn't want to have a Saturday morning lab. He couldn't get in.
Travel back and forth to home.
So we could come home. Yeah. And they're like, nope, so
no, that's not okay. That's not exactly what happened. He wanted an accommodation. So there's accommodations for students with that have a 504. They allow for early class registration. And he knew that there was labs on Saturday as well as weekday. And he knew that he wouldn't necessarily have his like thyroid, the hormone replacement in place. So he wanted to be able to travel home on the weekends as needed. And the surgeon, he's treated at Memorial Sloan Kettering. Like they do these all the time. And they said that they were the ones who said they're like, put anxiety on there and he'll get it right away. Like they could see where the school was going.
That's really sad. I mean, does that come down to, well, even anxiety though? I mean, you can't physically see that either. I mean, is it because they're not familiar with thyroid cancer? I mean, it is cancer.
I felt like every time he said cancer to someone, I don't think they deal with it often. And I'm assuming they don't, right? So I just feel like they didn't quite know what to do with it. Whereas anxiety post-COVID, I think so many kids have it. So you get pretty much an auto. And so, yeah, his frustration came from there were kids. He's like, they don't even have anxiety. They got doctors to write it, like admittedly, so that they could get this accommodation. He's like, and now it turns out he has Saturday lab. He's relatively regulated now. Like he's pretty good. It's been okay. Like the world didn't end. And I think that's important to see also through this process. But at the time when he got the Saturday lab, it was so mentally devastating because he wasn't well regulated. Right. Like, they register in the spring. Right. It was right after surgery. And he was like, I'm never going to be able to do this. So it felt absolutely ridiculous at the time, like from my perspective.
So would your son be open to both of you meeting with like the appropriate university personnel to talk through this? Because it sounds like they need to be educated kind of about this process, about what's going on, and you would probably be really good advocates.
So I think that it's something that now you suggest it's something we'll discuss with him, but I think right now, no. I think right now he's managing, but I think that it's something that, he is very cognizant of that, like, to be an advocate for other people, even through like that being a male 18-year-old papillary thyroid. It's pretty rare. So he's done a lot in that space as well. So I think he'd be open, just maybe not the second.
And I think to me, it's really sad that the school is saying that, he has to do all of this himself. I mean, me as a parent, I mean, I help my kids out through college, navigate the medical system. They're not really adults yet. They are adults, but they're not. I mean, they still need us as parents, I think, to help support them. And again, I think to model how to advocate for things that they need.
Yeah, no, that's great feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Anything else? Any other questions?
One more person. Hi, good morning.
Hi.
my first question was kind of answered by them that can you do 504 for college, and they said like their son is one. So my question now is, how do you facilitate it? Like who starts the process? The person who's going to college, of course they are 18, they need to, or does the 504 automatically get carried to the college?
Yeah.
They're going to.
For the college, I would say it's probably, well, I would say it has to be the student. Obviously, they're probably 18 or over 18, but I would say along with the parent. Very rarely, of course, would you have the school initiate that or or take it on. So I would say it would have to come from that. Like I said, I found at least at the middle school, high school level, it was more helpful when I had medical documentation, from the doctor and medical recommendation. It held more weight than what I could ever say to them.
Okay. And like initially we had like a lot of pushback when we started the process. Like it took me near to 6 months to get her 504. So I'm assuming it's going to be again hard to push it if she's doing on her own and she's 18 and she goes to college. Do you have any recommendations? Like,
do you mean like, is your question like how long it should take to get a 504?
Yeah, like I initially got a lot of pushback from our school district about 504. So I'm assuming that might be same when she goes to college and college. So do you have like any proper way to do it so that it can be done at the earliest?
Yeah, the 6 month, that's really a long time. That's 2/3 of the school year. So my gosh, I would hope it shouldn't take that long. I would, again, at least at the high school level, the district should have an equity officer, a navigator. And, sometimes, I mean, you hate getting nasty. I mean, sometimes you need to go above people's heads. Maybe it's to the school board.
Yeah, that's what happened. Like I really had to fight a lot because as you said previously, it's not seen disability. She's doing sports, she's doing everything, she's participating in everything. So it was more of like, oh, she's fine kind of attitude. So yeah, there was a lot of pushback, but we did fight. And this was the pushback, despite the fact I work for the same school district. So, yeah. So
I know.
Finally got it. But that's my, like, I'm just worried now. She has 2 years to go to college, and like I'm worried that once they're on, as you say, they're 18, but they still need parents, and they are adult as per legally on documents, but they really are not, So I'm kind of worried on that. Yeah,
I mean, I know what would probably make their head spin is if we'll give you a copy of that PowerPoint. If you did contact like the 504 or file a complaint or something, I guarantee you that would probably get them into action really quick because they wouldn't want to deal with that. And I don't know why schools, and like I said, I work for the school system, but they're just, a lot of them are just so reluctant just to put these.
I think due to the legal aspect of it, they're like always scared about it, like happens, So I get that, but then it should be done when it's necessary. That's my thing.
It should be, and I would say, in planning for college, maybe even before college starts, or when your child knows where they're going to go, to meet with those people, the equity people or whoever is at that college, and to say, hey, I'm going to front load you right now and tell you, this is my son, this is our daughter. This is our history. These are the accommodations that were provided in high school. Here's a doctor's letter. Highly recommended that these need to be provided. So maybe you can do some front loading once your child determines what school they're going to go to.
Okay, thank you.
I have some. If my son had thyroid cancer, like when I was going, I would ask, so it's availability resource centers, ARC is typically what it goes by at the college level, that does all the accommodations. ARC. Okay. You typically, when you go on college tours, ask if you can meet with them. Okay. Because you'll get a better understanding of how they actually function. Mm-hmm. I didn't have this experience. And then the other thing is, once she accepts to a college, you should be able to start, as she said, front loading. Mm-hmm. And because I know, so my son, it wasn't thyroid cancer, but my son went to school with someone who had a 504 plan. They front loaded everything in, and the day he got to college, he had all his accommodations. And it's the same school like that my son's going to. So it just shows like that sometimes knowledge is power, and you have something I didn't have.
Yeah, like that's my question.
Yeah, so I mean, what they did is they had our 504 in a binder, his 504 in a binder. They literally sat down with them, went through it, got it approved, because and they did it with him sitting there. Okay. They actually did it on like when you go to college for like the orientation. Right. That was one of the stuff that they went and met with them. They scheduled time. Thanks. So sorry. No, I don't want anyone to go through what like we went through. So
thank you. No, and I think that's great. And you know, if you have a 504 plan in high school and you go to college, you all of a sudden, you know, don't get rid of that disability just because you go to college. So that should follow you. Yeah. Anything else? Any other questions?
No. Yeah, I just work for a college, so I'm out.
Yeah, for sure.
What state?
We're in Pennsylvania.
Okay. So I work at a university in Texas. We have a department called Student Disability Services. So you can get hooked up with them, and they provide. I think.
No, my son was denied everything every step of the way. He ended up going into surgery with no bilateral. Yeah.
So I would touch base with whatever we need.
Changes.
Well, we're in Connecticut, which is one of the most accommodating states. So actually, it should have been the opposite. Like it just really was like there. It was pure. Yeah, they'll give it to you for anxiety for pretty much nothing else.
Yeah, yeah. I think at least at my university where I worked, I think that there would be more apps. I think
that's great.
Different.
No, that's great. That's good to hear.
Universities should be set up with some kind of disability department.
Yeah.
They were. It was unreal. I think though we weren't knowledgeable, which was what I was saying. Like we were doing it at front face value, and she has the advantage. Sorry, she has the advantage that she has a 504 to go off of. We were coming in. My son had a diagnosis. We were quickly trying to get everything aligned before surgery. Yeah. So a little bit different. I do have. Did you have? No. I was just no. Sorry. No. I have to run to another. I'm facilitating another session. So thank you for coming. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it.